Skepticism versus dogmatism. In the heart of intellectual discourse, skepticism and dogmatism stand as towering sentinels, embodying the far-reaching spectrum of human perspectives on knowledge, belief, and the nature of truth. This dynamic dichotomy challenges us to explore the intricate map of our cognition, questioning not only what we know but also the very capacity we can know anything at all. Skepticism, an invaluable tool in the philosopher's arsenal, promotes an attitude of inquiry and doubt about the certitude of knowledge. It does not stand as a monolithic entity, but rather embodies an array of viewpoints, each adding another dimension to this philosophy. The skeptical lens comes into focus differently depending on its field of view. A universal skeptic would question the potential of gaining any genuine knowledge, suggesting a landscape where everything we consider to be known is shrouded in mist. On the other hand, a localized skeptic might isolate their skepticism to specific domains, such as the abstract notions of morality or the profound enigma of metaphysics. Delving into the skeptic's mindset uncovers a world characterized by perpetual questioning, a world where knowledge is fluid and constantly being scrutinized. Such a worldview encourages us to cast a critical eye on our certainties and assumptions, to maintain an open mind, and to value the journey of seeking truth as much as, if not more than, the end destination. This acceptance of the unknown and the unknowable, while it might seem daunting, provides the flexibility to adapt, to learn, and to grow. The canvas of skepticism, with its myriad shades and tones, paints a portrait of knowledge as an unending voyage of discovery rather than a fixed destination. As we continue to traverse the spectrum of philosophical perspectives, we encounter dogmatism at the opposing end to skepticism. Dogmatism embodies an unwavering stance that certain ideas exist beyond the realm of inquiry or doubt. This perspective demands acceptance of its tenets without the requirement for additional proof. It's an unyielding fortress of belief, grounded in the conviction of absolute truth, and often unresponsive to the probing influence of external evidence or contrasting viewpoints. A dogmatist views the world through a lens of absolute certainties, with their beliefs cast in a rigid mold of unquestioned truth. This immutability creates a staunch framework within which dogmatists operate, dismissing opposition and conflicting evidence without a second thought. In the dogmatist's world, the destination of truth is already known and fixed, as opposed to the endless journey of discovery proposed by skepticism. This steadfast conviction can provide comfort and a sense of purpose, but can also prevent critical thought and stifle intellectual growth. However, the picture of dogmatism isn't entirely bleak. While its rigidity can thwart progress and discourse, it also provides a reference point, a benchmark against which to measure alternative views and hypotheses. In the broader conversation, dogmatism and skepticism aren't merely polar opposites, but rather two parts of a dynamic relationship, providing the tension necessary for intellectual exploration and evolution. Yet, this balancing act between these contrasting views underlines the necessity for a measured approach to knowledge, blending openness to new ideas with a healthy dose of critical inquiry. It is the interplay of truth, perception, and the contextual framework which encapsulates the essence of an assertion, no matter how paradoxical or false it may appear on the surface. The critical element to understand here is that any assertion, despite its apparent contradiction or falsity, holds the potential for veracity within a system specifically designed around it. This system, underpinned by unique rules and parameters, forms the lens through which the statement is evaluated, and thus, perceived as true. In essence, a seemingly illogical statement may obtain legitimacy and credence, not due to its inherent validity, but rather by virtue of the context within which it is positioned. This framework, inherently biased towards the statement it envelops, will allow even the most implausible proposition to flourish and find acceptance. It reminds us that objectivity is often a product of context, while subjectivity, paradoxically, can become an architect of its own truth. The idea here is that even if something sounds completely false or crazy, it can actually be true in a special situation that's built around it. It's like having a game where the rules are made to make this strange idea correct. In other words, an idea that seems wrong or silly can seem right when it's put into a context that supports it. The situation shapes how we see the idea. This shows us that what we think is true can change based on where and how we look at it. For example, let's consider the statement, "A tree falling in a forest doesn't make a sound if no one is around to hear it." At first glance, this seems absurd. Of course a falling tree makes a sound, whether or not anyone is there to hear it. However, if we construct a system of thought around this statement where sound is defined as not just the physical vibrations in the air, but the entire process of those vibrations being received and processed by a hearing organism, then the statement starts to make sense. If there is no one around to process the vibrations of the falling tree into what we understand as sound, then, within this system of thought, it's true to say that the falling tree doesn't make a sound. In this way, A seemingly contradictory statement can be made true within a specific context or framework. The concept of truth is inherently tied to the context in which it is expressed. Therein lies the inherent flexibility of reality, as well as its capriciousness. Indeed, any assertion, regardless of its inherent correctness, can be rendered untrue when evaluated within a differing conceptual framework. A statement, despite being grounded in evidence and logic within one system, can falter when transposed to an alternative system of thought. For instance, a mathematical claim, irrefutable within the bounds of conventional mathematics, might crumble when placed within the nonlinear dynamics of quantum mechanics. Similarly, a principle that holds up under our familiar, everyday physics might become nonsensical within the context of cosmology. Thus, our perception of truth is invariably tied to the lens through which we view it. It underscores the importance of context, as well as the relative nature of truth itself. In simple terms, something that's true in one situation might not be true in another. It's like the rules of the game changing. What scores you points in one game might cause you to lose in another. Let's take an example. You might have a rule in a game, like the player who has the most points wins. This is true for many games. But, if you switch to a game where the goal is to have the least points, like in golf, that rule is no longer true. The same idea can be right in one situation, and wrong in another. It shows how our understanding of what's true can depend on where we're looking from. A good example of this concept can be found in the world of physics. For centuries, Newton's laws of motion were considered absolutely true. They accurately described how apples fall from trees and how planets orbit the sun. But when scientists started exploring the behavior of particles at the quantum level, these true laws no longer held up. Quantum particles behave in ways that are completely contradictory to Newton's laws. They can be in two places at once, and their properties only become defined when they are observed. In the system of Newtonian physics, these behaviors are impossible, and thus, a true assertion within Newton's laws, an object at rest stays at rest unless acted upon, becomes false within the context of quantum physics. So, depending on the system of ideas we're operating within, what we understand as true can shift dramatically. The inherent verity or falsity of a statement is thus not a feature of the statement itself, but a byproduct of its context. This is a powerful and perhaps startling revelation. It implies a certain egalitarianism of ideas, where any idea, irrespective of its seeming lack of validity, can gain credibility when placed within an appropriate framework. An outrageous proposition can morph into an irrefutable fact, given the right backdrop. Such a notion brings skepticism and dogmatism into a new light, providing a unique interplay between these two contrasting perspectives. Skepticism, with its questioning and doubting approach, is counterbalanced by dogmatism's steadfast certainty. Yet, within the fluid boundaries of contextual truth, both can find their place and justification. It's a complex dance between disbelief and certainty, shaped and guided by the ever-shifting sands of context. Let's imagine a conversation between a dogmatist and a skeptic on the existence of extraterrestrial life. The dogmatist firmly believes that given the vastness of the universe, there must be other intelligent life forms out there. The skeptic, on the other hand, argues that without empirical evidence, such a belief is unsubstantiated. The principle of contextual truth offers a middle ground. In the context of statistical probability and the sheer scale of the universe, the dogmatist's belief holds water. It makes sense that we're not alone given the billions of potentially habitable planets. This context validates the dogmatist's standpoint. Yet, from the perspective of empirical science, which relies on observable, measurable evidence, the skeptic's position is valid. Until concrete evidence of alien life is found, skepticism remains scientifically justified. In this scenario, contextual truth reconciles skepticism and dogmatism, not by declaring one correct and the other incorrect, but by acknowledging the contexts within which each perspective is valid. Each viewpoint is justified in its own context, and neither is absolutely right or wrong. Every system of belief or set of assertions can be likened to a unique language or the rules of a distinct game. It can be translated into other languages, adopting their contexts, or it can remain insulated, maintaining its own specific context. Both possibilities coexist in our consciousness, neither inherently superior to the other. The equilibrium between skepticism and dogmatism is thus reflected in the dynamism of these shifting contexts and perspectives. Consider, for instance, the assertion that jumping off a roof is deadly. In our waking life, guided by the laws of physics and biology, this statement rings true. It's a dangerous, life-threatening act. However, shift this assertion into the framework of a dream state, and its validity wanes. In dreams, we often defy the laws of nature, flying or falling without harm. Here, the potentially fatal act of jumping off a roof loses its peril. This simple example underscores how even our most staunch beliefs are shaped by the context within which they are perceived. In any intellectual discourse, maintaining a consistent frame of reference is paramount. Debates and discussions must be held within the boundaries of the same system of assertions. If we diverge from this principle, engaging in discourse that transcends multiple systems of belief, the resulting conversation often devolves into futility. Our dialogue becomes a proverbial apples to oranges comparison, leaving us mired in miscommunication and misunderstanding. If two parties argue from different conceptual frameworks, their discourse becomes an exercise in futility. They speak in different languages, with their assertions carrying distinct implications within their respective systems. Without a common ground, their arguments can merely echo in a void, never truly engaging with each other. Therefore, a productive debate is always bound by the parameters of a shared system, a common language that ensures that ideas can be effectively exchanged, examined, and understood.